Vice. I'm Zach Blackerby. He is Brad Law. And normally we wait 5 or 6 minutes into the show to kick off stat time. We are waiting no longer. 0 more seconds, Brad Law, if that's okay with you. I've got 4 stats that I'm thinking about going into Auburn and Mississippi State this weekend. So let's start things off talking about some of the stats that pertain to Auburn. And we discussed this briefly earlier in the week, Brad, but let's start this off. Auburn threw 0 passes in the third quarter against Ole Miss. It's clear that running the ball was the game plan. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But the balance just isn't there. We've talked about balance before. You've talked about balance a ton. The breakdown by quarter: first quarter, 2 passes for 16 yards. Second quarter, 4 passes for 10 yards. Third quarter, no passes for 0 yards, of course. And in the fourth quarter, they threw it 11 times for 96 yards because they were down by 2 scores and had to start moving the football. But your reaction, Brad, to 0 pass attempts in the third quarter by Auburn quarterbacks?
Without going back and there's always a chance that I could go back and look at the play-by-play and kind of remember the exact scenarios in the game. But no, in general, you don't unless you're Air Force, you don't have an entire quarter where you don't throw the ball. It was not a quarter where Auburn went 3 and out twice and Ole Miss held the ball for 12 minutes. And so you only had 6 play. Auburn had a game like that earlier in the year, but this wasn't it. And Hugh Freeze addressed the lack of balance in his press conference on Monday, saying that, you have to be more balanced. And as we've talked about, so we'll repeat ourselves a little bit here. Balance isn't 30 runs and 30 passes. It's not 250 rushing yards and 250. Those are balanced. You are balanced if you're doing that.
Sure.
But you don't have to do that to be balanced. Balance just means it's 3rd down and 3. You can run for a first down or pass for a first down. You feel confident in your ability to execute either the run game or the pass game consistently throughout the game. And Auburn hadn't done that from a passing perspective really all year.
Brad, do you think the lack of balance is game flow gets away from them, or they know or they don't trust the passing game whatsoever?
It's probably the latter. I would have, because
I think so too. Yeah.
I just think that if they did, they would call on it more. If you trusted the pass game, if you thought it's like what we talked about on Sunday, they're calling the stuff right now that they're most confident in. And I think they're 3 times as confident in the running game as they are in the passing game.
Yep.
And that's why in this game, there were 3 times as many runs as there were passes.
Right. And they probably should be more confident in that. Does that change moving forward, do you think? Or is this going to be a run heavy team against Mississippi State, against Vandy, against Arkansas, against everybody?
Yeah. I'm fascinated to see, because now Freeze has said a couple of times, I'm really struggling with, do we need to go more tempo in the quick passing game? And we have to be more balanced. I mean, he said some things that would make you think and this is the overarching big point here. If over the last 5 games, the head coach is going to take off, because you can't wear multiple hats at the same time. All right. No matter how good you look in a hat, Zach, if you put 2 of them on at the same time, it'd look goofy.
Sure.
You have to take one hat off to put another one on. And if he takes off the recruiting hat and puts on the heavily involved in the offense hat, let me back up. If he puts on the heavily involved in the offense hat, then he has to take off the recruiting hat and the fundraising hat and all this other. You have to take those hats off. I do think you see more of that. I think you see Auburn with a more balanced or attempt to be more balanced in terms of the play calls. But that's the big question: is he going to do that? Or is the recruiting momentum so positive that you weigh the gains you get in that department against the losses in having him heavily involved in the offense, and you go, all right, the scale tips this way, we're going to stick with this and deal with the consequences?
All right, my second stat that I want to share with you, Brad Law, Jaylen McLoud. One of the transfers I was most excited about this season. It's like, we haven't seen him healthy. When are we going to see him healthy, and what will that look like? He rushed the passer on 16 snaps. He had 16 pass rushing snaps against Ole Miss. According to PFF, on those 16 pass rushing snaps, he recorded 8 pressures. So that's an easy win percentage of 50%. So of those 8 pressures, 1 sack, 1 quarterback hit, and 6 hurries on 16 snaps. Brad, that is ridiculous.
My goodness. And how many passes did Ole Miss have?
A lot.
Yeah, I don't think it's all that much. I mean, they passed it more than they did 2 years ago.
18,
or last year. So they had 18 passes.
I felt like they passed it more than that. I guess they did.
And he rushed the passer 16 times.
What PFF says.
And he had 8 successful pressures.
Mm-hmm.
So on nearly half of Ole Miss's passes, just according to these numbers, Jaylen delivered an effective pass rush.
It's pretty insane.
That's good.
Pretty insane when you look at it. Marcus Harris had a good night rushing the passer. Jason Jones was Auburn's 3rd best pass rusher, according to the analytics from Saturday night. And so I think, you need Jaylen McLoud to do that, right? That's what you brought him in here to do. The pass rush this season has actually been better than I thought it would be going into it. I kind of labeled the pass rush and the wide receivers as the 2 weaknesses on the team. I wouldn't say pass rush is a weakness. I certainly wouldn't say it's a strength, but I think it's fine.
Yeah.
Obviously the other weakness is glaring with receiver, but Jaylen McLoud, maybe we're finally seeing him healthy, and this is what he could have been, if he didn't have that leg injury at the start of the season.
Yeah, and against Mississippi State, I think the Ole Miss offensive line may be a little better than the Mississippi State offensive line. With a dual threat quarterback, it's a little tough because are you rushing to contain or are you rushing for a sack? Auburn had 3 sacks in the first half against Ole Miss, and they forced Jackson Dart into just his 3rd interception of the year. So, yeah, I thought the defensive line as a whole played a solid game, and Jaylen is a part of that. It's very good to see. And like you said, Auburn needs it's got to get production. It's got to get some push, got to get some pressure from the edge of that defensive line. And it's really good to see Jaylen doing that and being as advertised. Definitely over the next 5 games, you got to have that. You can have some success if you can put pressure on these next 5 quarterbacks.
Yeah, because we haven't really seen it from anybody else consistently outside of Marcus Harris.
Yeah.
I wanted to see more out of Elijah McAllister. I don't think he doesn't really have any bend. I think he's a good run defender, but he has no bend to his game whatsoever, which is a shame, but I think he can help out this team in other ways. And we're starting to see roles kind of form now that McLeod is back. Steven Sings isn't really doing what we thought he could do, depending on who you ask. And then, none of the other defensive linemen with their hands on the ground really are impacting the passing game. So that's something where you look at this incoming class with like the likes of Joseph Phillips and, can a guy like that come in and impact this team right away? I think they're going to have to go to the portal again for pass rusher this offseason, Brad. So we will certainly be monitoring that situation moving forward here at Village Vice.
It's good to have somebody like Keldrick Falk too already who is developing and can kind of turn. I think we all expect, we talked about him before the season and some of the great pass rushers in the past, like a D Ford and some guys like that who didn't necessarily light things up their freshman year from a statistical perspective. But you could see the explosiveness. You could see that once the development happened, he was going to be a menace. And I think you look at Keldrick and say the same thing.
Yeah. I do think Keldrick, especially the way he's being used now, and they could totally change this in an offseason, but I don't see as much D Ford or Carl Lawson in him as I did. I see more Marlon Davidson than anything else from him, just as far as like recent, like true defensive end type player. But they could change that in an offseason totally with the way they use him. So I'm interested to see, do they keep him at defensive end? Do they try to move him to the jack linebacker spot? I don't know. But that'll be fun to follow moving forward. But yeah, whatever Keldrick is doing next year, you got to think he's going to have a huge step from this season to next season. Brad Law, I've got 2 more stats, but first I got to tell you about our friends at mybookie.ag. MyBookie, the best place to wager on all of your sports action. They've also got other things like casino as well as a bunch of other stuff. So head over to mybookie.ag, check it out. It doesn't matter where you live. mybookie.ag, they've got you covered. And after you make your free account, and you make that first deposit, be sure to use promo code NEXTROUND for a little extra cheddar to play with. MyBookie.ag, use promo code NEXTROUND. All right, my next stat that I want to share with you, and I feel like Raldo Fairweather is a staple in this segment because he's always the bright spot. Raldo Fairweather caught every pass he was thrown against Ole Miss. Targeted 5 times, results in 5 catches. But an interesting note here, all 5 of those catches, Brad, were between the numbers and within 9 yards of the line of scrimmage. So high percentage throws from Peyton Thorne and Robbie Ashford. All 5 may have come from Peyton. I need to go back and look at that. But Raldo Fairweather, the security blanket of all security blankets in this offense.
You know, as we're talking about these guys, whether it's Jaylen McLoud or, quite frankly, Elijah McAllister, Steven Sings, we're talking about guys who are doing sort of, if we're honest and objective, about what we thought they would do. Thought we'd see it from Jaylen a little earlier, but he had the injury. The other guys are about what they were advertised to be. And so far, Raldo has been himself what he was advertised to be. Reliable pass catcher. He's not a deep threat. He's not a slot receiver. He's not an outside guy who's going to run a go route. That's not his game. He's the reliable flex, tight end, mismatch problem with linebackers or safeties. And it's kind of what he's designed to do. And I can hear fans from every section of the stadium saying, why don't we take the fourth quarter game plan with Raldo Fairweather? Fourth quarter against Cal, fourth quarter against Ole Miss. Make that the first quarter game plan. Let's get some drive starters with the security blanket, if you will, and let him get established. Now, there have been some games where Auburn targeted Raldo early in ball games. I think the Georgia game was one, and LSU definitely was one. And you know, he was covered, or a defender made a play, or the pass wasn't executed, or what have you. But he's proven time after time that if you target him and you get it close, most of the time, he's the guy, I think, you tell me if you agree or disagree, that you have the most confidence in getting a 50-50 ball.
Yeah. And I don't even know who would be second on that list. Like, he's clear number 1. Totally.
Yeah. Right. Because some guy like Jay Fair is but he's not a 50. You don't throw up a possession situation to him. It's a different game. Mm-hmm. So, yep, Raldo's the guy. And if you're looking for playmakers in the passing game, give him more opportunities. Is kind of the easy thing to say, but that's my knee-jerk reaction to the stat. Easy to say, hard to execute, but
totally.
You know, I'm also a podcast host and not a coach. So
he's been the bright spot of this offense for sure. Mm-hmm. All right, last one. Half of Mississippi State's rushing yards against Arkansas were outside of the tackles. In Mississippi State's game against Arkansas, 35 of their 135 yards, so not half, but a big chunk.
Yeah.
Nope, I didn't add this right. It is 65. It's half. 65 of their 130 yards on the ground were outside the tackles. 13 of 35 attempts on the ground resulted in an outside run. So they went 35 carries for 130 yards, which isn't great. 35 yards were around left end on 6 attempts, and 30 yards were around right end on 7 attempts. Your takeaways for that?
Dual threat quarterback, Mike Wright, likely. Now I'll start studying more film on Mississippi State today and watching some of their games from this year. But my first sort of thought would be that a lot of those are zone reads where he's pulling and running outside the tackle, or he's flushed out of the pocket and a pass play turns into a run and he's running outside of the tackles. He had their most rushing attempts, or second most rushing attempts, most rushing yards in their win over Arkansas. And for the year, right? So one game as a starter now, and Wright sits second on the team in rushing yards behind Jaquavius Marks. So that's my immediate takeaway, is that they are a team that I'd be curious to know what those stats are for their first games when Will Rogers was the quarterback. If it still skews that way, my guess is it doesn't skew anywhere close to that. And they're more between the tackles running team. But certainly with the dual threat guy, you got to be prepared outside those tackles, make some tackles in space.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, I think this is a similar discussion we were having going into Cal when we thought, containment was going to be the issue for this team. And they're not perfect at it, but they're way better at it than I thought they would be. In fact, if I had to pick the biggest issue on this defense, it's not going to be containment. I feel good about the matchup as far as Auburn's defense versus Mississippi State's offense based off of everything that we've seen.
Yeah.
It's just, can Auburn score points? And I don't know the answer to that.
What is your take on State running outside the tackles so much? Do you think that's a one-game deal because of a dual threat quarterback, or what does that say to you?
No, because not all of it was the quarterback,
Yeah.
and some of it was, the running back had to bust it outside based off of the, what Arkansas's defense was doing. So that's where it ended up running, and that's how PFF had to chart it. But I think a lot of it has to do with inconsistencies in their interior offensive line as far as performance goes. And I think they've got speed, especially with Mike Wright there as well. So I think both of those guys are able to do that. I'm surprised how much it was called versus the rest of it, just because of the nature of, that's hard to do when you don't have a great offensive line to get to the edge. And so I think if they do that against Auburn, I don't think it'll go well, personally. But that's what Ole Miss did. Ole Miss hit the outside against Auburn, and early it kind of torched them. Then over the course of the game, they reacted to it, and they got better at defending it. But also, Ole Miss has got better horses than Mississippi State does, especially at running back. So I don't know. I hope they do that against Auburn. Personally, I hope that's their game plan, is to attack the edges, because I think Auburn's got better athletes than Mississippi State does.
And as you said, Auburn was just hurt. They were just burned on the edge, especially the right side of the defensive line. Ole Miss's left side of their offensive line, and Judkins himself. Look, Quinshon Judkins is a terrific player. He's going to average like 12 yards a carry against Auburn for as long as he's at Ole Miss, because he's outstanding. But when he plays Auburn, he's even a little bit better.
He's great. He's a great running back.
And that's understandable, right? You get it. If Auburn had a guy that was from near Oxford, he would play a little different every time he played. JJ Pegues played a little different against Ole Miss before he transferred to Ole Miss. Yeah. But the fact of the matter is he made some big plays over the left side of their offensive line. So now Auburn looks on tape on the right side of the D line and says, what do we correct? What do we need to do to fix that? Because State may very likely try to attack in the same way.
Yeah, and there's different ways to attack that, and we can discuss that in just a moment, Brad.
All right. Before we get to more Mississippi State talk, I have to tell you all about my friends at Manscaped. Thank you all for the comments, by the way, to our previous videos. They are phenomenal, and you're noticing Manscaped, and you know what? You're not going to be the only one noticing a difference. The special person in your life will thank you when you go to manscaped.com and you get 20% off plus free shipping when you use the promo code VICE. Now, if you don't use the promo code, you don't get 20% off plus free shipping. But if you use the promo code VICE at manscaped.com, you will. Make sure you keep everything neat and clean and fresh, including your neck, including your face, with the Handyman, which is what I use, the compact face shaver. Easy to use, easy to clean, easy to store. Couldn't be easier. Promo code VICE, manscaped.com, 20% off, free shipping. Do it now. Manscaped, the best in men's grooming.
All right, Brad. Yeah, I'm curious to see how Auburn moves guys around the defensive front if they feel they need to. They may not feel that they need to, but the linebacker rotation has been interesting. They're playing guys and rotating guys more than I expected them to, especially with the with how Eugene Asante has been playing. I just think he's got more range than everybody else. Maybe a healthier Austin Keys gets more reps against the Mississippi State. That's one of the positions I'm looking at, obviously, with stopping this Mississippi State rushing attack.
And speaking of linebackers, Cam Riley delivered the biggest hit of the day against Ole Miss. He had a tremendous hit, and I'll tell you, he's a guy that we've almost forgotten about this year. We haven't been able to call his name a whole lot, and whether it's Austin coming back and responsibilities shifting, or if, boy, a healthy and productive Cam Riley could be enormous for Auburn because he's got size, he's got good speed, and if he can put it together and be consistent, we saw him last year have a couple of double-digit tackle games, would be massive for Auburn in this game and through November.
Yeah, I mean those double-digit games came early in the season, and then he kind of disappeared after that, and that's sadly what's happened so far, with the exception of a few moments, like you just said. He had a great hit in the Ole Miss game, but I think from a physicality standpoint, if this game does turn into kind of an ugly back and forth, typically that favors the more talented team, as most scenarios in college football.
Yeah.
And I believe, even though Auburn's roster is way worse than it should be, I believe they have more talent.
Yeah.
And usually there's a mismatch right at the quarterback situation, because I think Rodgers is a significantly better quarterback than any of the guys we have in our room. I don't think Mike Wright is better than the guys that we have in our room. So I think that's going to be a huge factor in this. Can Auburn limit Mike Wright? And I think they can. Even
if Will Rogers was healthy, like, their offense isn't what it was
the
last couple of years. We talked a little bit about it on Monday's show. They went away totally. And Zach Arnett said, I'm not Mike Leach. I'm not going to attempt to run his offense. And they've changed. What this will come down to is going to be and this is this is every conversation, every coach will say this, but it's the truth. In looking at other stats, Auburn is, where is Auburn? I had this. They're 88th nationally, right? I mean, just almost right in the middle of the pack, allowing 4.3 yards per rush. Mississippi State is allowing fewer than 4 yards. They're at 3.59. They're 46th in the country, allowing less than 3.6 yards per rush. What's Auburn's strength offensively? Running the ball.
Yeah.
Mississippi State, what do they want to do more? They want to run the ball more. So the team that is able to cap the ability of the opponent to run and force them into what they're less comfortable doing, that's your winner. Objectively, the people who set the odds, the people who are objective, they're not passionately, personally invested, they think Auburn should win the game.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, all the metrics do too. FBI has Auburn at a 62%, 62 point something percent chance of winning. And that lines up with what Vegas is saying. And so far, when it comes to this Auburn team, Vegas has been spot on predicting what they're going to do.
But it won't be easy. Don't expect a game that looks like Oregon and Washington. Don't do it. Hey, it's the middle of the week. And if you go into Saturday expecting a game that looks like Oregon and Washington, that's on you. It is squarely on you. It ain't going to look that way.
Yeah.
It's going to be low scoring, probably. It's going to be dirty, probably. It's going to be ugly, probably.
Oh, I think it's going to look similar to Mississippi State and Arkansas a week ago.
I think
it's going to look more similar to that than anything else. And there's a chance Auburn's offense looks better, right? There's a chance. But until I see it, I'm just going to kind of hold off on that. So
yeah, you're probably not going to average 8 yards a carry in the running game, no matter how balanced you are. It won't look that way unless something is completely out of the norm.
Yeah.
For what it's looked like this year. So set the expectation now so that your reaction lines up with the expectation going in.
Yeah, just get the win. That's all that matters. We'll talk about it one more time this week on Thursday, so be sure to come back and hit that subscribe button so you won't miss the show. But Brad, that just about does it for today's show.
It is. A final note, Auburn fans are like that little girl in Halloween Town with the cookie. They're like, I want that cookie. I want that cookie. I want that cookie. I want that win. I want that win. That's all of us this week. All right. Thanks for watching. Remember, until next time, everyone has vices. Make sure Village Vice is one of yours.